Hi everyone, and welcome to Tony Tonkin Show. Glad to know that there's so many people that are online waiting to come on board. It's great to have you with me. Remember, this is an opportunity for you to talk about the things that matter to you and to me and to everybody else. And also, it's an opportunity to spread ideas, to talk about the things that you think are important to discuss. And there's a number of things that we'll be discussing. Well, hold on. There's two things primarily we'll be discussing today, apart from any other suggestions that you might care to mention to me. And they are the split that is the coalition or the no-alition that has happened yesterday and today, and also some conversations about my favourite president, Donald Trump, and the things that he's doing in Davos, which makes us all wonder what sort of a crazy person he really is. But we'll start with the coalition split for the second time since the last election. And what does that mean? Well, in my view, as someone already posted previously before we even started the session, that it's one of the it's a joy. It's a joy, in fact, to see the coalition breaking up as they are. Now, I will hold the view, though, that it is important to have a coalition that can keep the bastards honest, as was once quipped by the Democrat leader many, many years ago. And I think that it's important that we maintain some sort of cohesion within coalition parties, because that does mean that it spreads the views. There are more variety of views, and those views need to be heard, even though we may disagree with most of them. I think that one of the most important things we do acknowledge right now is that Susan Lee is in trouble, and so is David Littleproud. That both of these leaders have proved to all of us that they are unable to lead, that they're unable to bring parties together, they are unable to coordinate appropriate policies and so forth. And one of the reasons why this has happened is that the parties themselves have not been able to decide which part of the electorate they wish to attract. So they have a problem, particularly deciding whether they should move further to the right, whether they should remain more central, or whether they should be more moderate, or whether they should move further to the left. The problem that they have is that they can't decide where the community or the populace generally sit around what it is that people want. Not only do people want a better and affordable living and housing and energy, so help around energy, cheaper energy prices, I guess. Those things are really important to everybody, of course. And those issues seem to be pushed into the back burner because the parties are so busy fighting amongst themselves over a position that they don't understand how to implement. They can't get their head around where people are right at the moment. And sitting amongst all of that stuff is the immigration policy, which unfortunately no party really has been able to grapple with appropriately. The Liberal Party have done pretty poorly around that, and I believe the Labor Party probably haven't done all that as much better either. So in my view, sitting in the middle of all of these problems happens to be immigration, because no party is able to articulate appropriately where they should sit in relation to that. And I believe that the Labor Party have missed the opportunity in explaining and articulating where their particular policy sits as to who comes into Australia. And then we have all of that split up because we have racism sitting on the right of politics, particularly with One Nation, as to who should come into Australia. And the most frustrating thing for me about One Nation, apart from Pauline Hanson and the fact that they have zero policies, is the fact that what little policy they have around immigration stems from a racist view that if you are of a different colour, a different religion, come from a different ethnic group, have a different background, whatever, you shouldn't be allowed into Australia. And that somehow they expect us to be able to make those evaluations through ASIO, and ASIO therefore make the decision, and therefore Tony Burke is the one that will finally make a decision in relation to those people, even though that has been tightened up with the current legislation that they've just passed in relation to who is entitled to come to this country, what views they have and so forth, and whether they're likely to be contribute back to our society, I guess, is the primary problem. So all of that stuff is there open for debate. And while they are relative important issues for us to be discussing, the coalition have decided that because of the vilification laws that were supposed to be imposed, which they wanted in the first instance, and that they decided they weren't going to get enough votes because the Greens were going to vote against that as well, that they decided, Albanese decided to abandon that. And in turn, that has caused a fracture within the coalition with regard to the Nationals and the Liberals anyway. The place is a mess. So I'll be interested to know what you think about the position that the Liberal Party should take in relation to the split, whether the Liberals and Nationals will actually ever get back together again. And, you know, my father, many years ago, who was a Liberal, would often say that the Liberals hated the Nationals and the Nationals hated the Liberals, primarily because each of these parties would have loved to have governed on their own, and they hated splitting the limelight with each other. And so over the years, that split has, I think, fractured even further, because at this particular point, the Nationals don't like, they demise Susan Lee, and that also the Liberals hate David Littleproud, absolutely hate him. And so when you've got two parties that despise each other so much, it's no wonder that they look for excuses to split. So I'm going to take us to a ABC article, which helps to, I think, explain this further. And then I've got a brief clip from the ABC from Casey Briggs talking about this very issue. And then I have a clip from Sky News talking with Bridget McKenzie about this as well, which is, before I go into that, I'll explain a little bit more about Bridget. But certainly, so I'm going to try and present to you the best possible view of all of this that I can, in the most unbiased way. Oh, God. If there is such a thing. So I'm going to try and be egalitarian about all of this, and hopefully give us a perspective about actually what's happening, and for you people out there, wonderful people that are in the comment section, to comment about some of these interesting diversions in relation to the split. So the coalition splits for second time since election after Nationals quit shadow cabinet. The coalition between the Liberal and National parties has split for the second time since the election. Go them! They're really well coordinated. After all eight Nationals front benches quit their role over a disagreement on hate laws, National leader David Littleproud said nobody in his party was willing to serve in a shadow ministry led by Susan Lee. And I guess, folks, that's pretty definitive. At the end of the day, Littleproud says, we don't like Susan Lee. And this is what I was saying before. They hate each other, and they hate Susan Lee. And I don't know whether that is a misogynistic response to Susan or what it is, but they just don't like her. I don't think it would have mattered. Hastie could have been the leader. I think it still would have applied. They just don't like any leader of the Liberal Party, because the National Party, even though they're leaking people to One Nation, I hasten to add, they want to have control. And when they don't have control and the influence and power that they would like, then they care to shit on the other person, which they're doing. Our coalition has become untenable, he says. This process, it wasn't all Susan Lee's fault. Oh, no, it wasn't. But it has been mismanaged by Susan Lee, which kind of says that it was her fault anyway. So one instance, it isn't all Susan, because they're blaming Albanese for it as well because of the legislation and free speech. And I just need to say, I think, that one of the things that we need to talk about, and I haven't got any posts on it necessarily that I can refer to, but we need to think about free speech and where that sits in Australia now. I have a view around that, which I'm happy to share with you, but somewhere in this conversation, we need to settle around whether or not we can criticise Israel or not. So we'll endeavour to do that. The minor party will sit by itself on the crossbench despite Mr Littleproud's insistence that the outcome is not what the National Party wants. It's hard to know what David thinks that they want. He doesn't necessarily articulate that, but certainly he doesn't want to be in the same party room as Susan Lee. The alliance, which has shaped the Conservative side of politics for decades, unravelled in spectacular fashion this week after 3 National Front benches voted against a bill to target hate groups and toughen other hate laws. That position has been agreed by the Nationals that day, but went against what the shadow cabinet of the Liberals and Nationals had determined earlier in the week, raising the question of whether the trio had breached shadow cabinet conventions. Mr Littleproud said he sent Miss Lee the resignation letters of his 3 senators, Ms Mackenzie, McDonald and Cadell, on Wednesday morning, but issued a warning that the whole party would quit if the resignations were accepted. So the argument Littleproud's using here is that you can accept the resignations from them as shadow ministers, but it doesn't mean they're resigning from, I guess, the coalition in a sense. So Miss Lee accepted the resignations on Wednesday afternoon, saying in a statement that Cabinet solidarity was not optional and the Nationals' conduct required action. And I guess what she's saying there is they'd already decided on the way they were going to vote. These 3 people decided they weren't going to vote in the way that they decided they were going to vote, and therefore they're going to be kicked out of the cabinet. Whereas, in reality, the Liberal Party believe, and the Liberal Party are quite, frankly, the Liberal Party are very critical of the solidarity that they see within the Labor Party. In fact, they will argue that the Labor Party can make decisions that everybody abides to regardless. And if you disagree with the Labor Party and you cross the bench, across the floor, then you're likely to get kicked out of the Labor Party, in fact. But for some reason, those policies don't necessarily apply for the Liberal Party. However, in this case, I think Lee thought they should. Ms Lee accepted the resignations on Wednesday afternoon, saying in a statement that Cabinet solidarity was not optional, blah, blah, blah. In a further statement on Wednesday night, she said she had urged Mr Littleproud not to walk away from the coalition and that it was unnecessary for the other 5 National Front benches to resign. I cannot stand by and have 3 courageous senators who put their jobs on the line for no reason that has any veracity whatsoever, Mr Littleproud said. There was an out yesterday for Miss Lee to not accept these 3 resignations. She was aware of the consequences if she did, and she still made the decision. Terrible Sue, bad Sue. Sue, you need to go to the naughty corner. You are an absolute disgrace. He insisted there was no malice towards Miss Lee. I find this really difficult to believe. But anyway, but suggested the position would not change while she remained leader, contrasting their relationship with what he said had been a more constructive relationship with former Liberal leader Peter Dutton. Now, if that isn't a smack in your face, I don't know what is. So he's saying that I would have preferred Peter Dutton, who basically was a disaster. They did an autopsy of the election, and they found that the sole reason why they lost was Peter Dutton. So, and it was scathing, apparently, of Peter Dutton's performance. So he's saying, I would have preferred the disaster who was Peter Dutton than you, Susan Lee. So what in the hell is that telling us? I do not know. So I'll take, and I've got some other pieces I can relate to some of this, and I see lots of comments, which is lovely. And I haven't. I just got to bring up something here before I forget. The person that helps me in this area. Just got to bring her thing up. So I'll do that now so that I can get some of those. Right. Right. So, okay. So I wanted to bring up this bit, which is Casey Briggs on the ABC just talking about this issue. And he kind of, I guess, puts it all into perspective. And his analysis, I think, is quite sound. So I'll just play this and we'll talk about it. I won't play all of it because it's about 8 minutes, but I'll play just the opening bits just so you can get a sense as to what he's talking about.
In the wake of the May 2025 federal election, Ros, well, then we saw the Nationals go sleep on the couch for a few nights and then get back together with the Liberal Party in coalition. This time, they've packed their bags, they've moved out, telling Susan Lee that the decision to quit the shadow cabinet is their final decision and that they won't sit in a cabinet, in a shadow cabinet under her. And so this does seem like a far deeper split, and the sort of context of this split is very different to what we saw, 8 months or so ago. Again, fresh in the wake of a federal election defeat when the parties were still finding their feet. There was no shadow cabinet at that point. You know, we were very early in this term and the coalition agreement was still being negotiated. But we're now 8 months into a term of parliament. And while David Littleproud was very keen to make the focus on the leadership of the Liberal Party and the decisions made during this sitting week, it's impossible to sort of think about what's happening here without looking at the broader political context and how it's shifted as well, just in the last 8 months. Most obviously, the political context around the One Nation Party, which polled 6.4% of the national first preference vote in May. Polling now is showing very clearly that it is significantly up on that. Precisely how far up, I can't quite tell you because the polls are showing a pretty broad variance. But polls this month have put One Nation somewhere between 15 and 22% of the vote. And the likelihood is, if One Nation is polling at around 20% nationally, they're polling significantly higher in regional areas and probably higher again in regional areas of Queensland. If you look at the seats, the seats that One Nation did the best in, of the 10 highest first preference votes for One Nation in May 2025, well, 7 of those seats are Nationals held at the moment. And so they are worried clearly, they would be worried clearly about the impacts that a rising One Nation vote would have. And I think Conservatives across the board fear what could happen if we see a repeat of what happened in Queensland, in the Queensland state election in 1998, when One Nation won 11 state parliament seats. They came second in nearly 24 more, and that was off a statewide vote of 22.7%, which is not far from the number we're talking about nationally at the moment.
So, sorry about that earlier. I just got to remember I can't flip between my tags while I'm showing a screen. So what it's saying, though, I think in that last bit is quite interesting, is that they did so well, that One Nation did so well in Queensland, that if that, and it's unlikely for a Queensland election to specifically transfer to a national election, but what he's really arguing is that in Queensland in particular, One Nation could, in effect, wipe out the coalition, and that is what the coalition should be afraid of. So, the Liberal Party, rather, should be afraid of. So, and we've now found, though, that the Nationals are having to justify their position in relation to this split. So, what do we find in regard to all of that? Well, I'm going to take you to a conversation that Bridget McKenzie's having with a commentator on Sky News. And you've got to remember that the Sky News is the Liberal Party network. And so there's this conversation happening, and it is significant simply because he is attacking Bridget about her stance in terms of resigning from the shadow ministry. And he's not very polite with her. And the interesting thing about Bridget is that she's a bit of an attack dog when you see her criticising the Labor Party. But when it comes to her defending herself, she's put on the back foot, she appears extremely defensive. And I think it's a really interesting view of who she is and how she is unable to defend herself and particularly her position?
Unable to support the decision taken to support the bill in its amended form. That's what it says, black and white.
So I've said to you now, this will be the third time, what the Liberal Party voted on Tuesday night was not what was presented at Shadow Cabinet, categorically. So there's going to be a contested about...
Yeah, sure is, because
I wrote the letter.
Senior Liberals
I'd like
have said
to know
to me
how
today...
you got a copy of a confidential letter, Kieran.
Senior Liberals have said to me today that you had concerns in relation to whatever you've articulated today, that they took the concerns to the government. The government responded quickly, acceded to your request for the changes, and you're denying that all of your concerns were dealt with. That's basically what you're saying, that there were still some outlying pieces or concerns around this bill, because as it was put to me, is all of your concerns as expressed by David Littleproud were dealt with amendments and you still voted against it.
That's incorrect. I'm in my party room. Your Liberal sources aren't. My party room made it very clear. They were also all aware of the consequences of our decision.
Yeah.
There were people in the room that were reluctant yeses to the legislation. But as one, they know the consequence of their decision and our deliberations. We're a collective, we don't have factions, and so through very difficult conversations, the red lines were drawn, amendments were drafted, the Liberals had the amendments and were unable to agree to them.
Well, they say that, as I've put it to you at the start, that David Littleproud has lied through this process. And then today, David Littleproud saying that you can't serve in a coalition under Susan Lee's leadership. This has gone off as well. They're saying, so one said to me, when did he decide who should be our leader? And that another Liberal source said that he's the one that will be rolled, essentially, not her. Was that a bad call for him to say, oh, we won't go back under Susan Lee? Because essentially he's saying, get rid of her or we're gone.
No, we're gone. Let me remove the ambiguity. We've gone. It was untenable. Our whole shadow ministry tendered their resignations in light of the leader of the Liberal Party accepting our offer to resign as 3 shadow cabinet ministers.
So the interesting part for me around that was that whose name I can't remember the interviewer's name now, but he was particularly interested in the Liberal, that he had a stack of information from the Liberal Party in relation to this shadow cabinet meeting, and he is being fed all these negative comments around David Littleproud to the point whereby he's saying David Littleproud is unable to survive. And it's just interesting to me that this was the coalition. Sorry, I lied again. I'm so used to saying that. This was the Liberal Party having a direct attack on the Nationals, expressing their decade-long hate towards their minor party that's represented in the coalition. And it is interesting just to watch it unfold. So the question remains, will Susan Lee survive, or will David Littleproud also get rolled? Doesn't mean then, oh, this would be a joke, doesn't mean then that Matt Canavan may become, even though he's in the Senate, may become the leader of the Nationals. And what a disaster. That would be the definition of turning further and further to the right in politics, to the point whereby you're busily shooting yourself in the foot all the time. Because I think Matt Canavan is the most likely person to actually shift to One Nation along with Barnaby Joyce. So the question then remains, is it likely that there will be others who will choose to coincide with or to move to One Nation? Because I think now that this split has occurred, it is likely. And then what happens then to not the Liberal Party, but to the Nationals, if they have more leakages to One Nation? What does it mean for their party? So to recap all of this, on one hand, we've got Susan Lee about to lose her job, and the coalition being split, and on the other hand, and no policies, no nothing that they actually present that is substantial, that the public is even interested in. And then we have the Nationals, who are tempted to move further and further to the right. The Liberal Party uncertain as to where they sit on that spectrum. And then we've got to the far right, we've got One Nation, who seem to be attracting a lot of the coalition voters. So where is this going to end? It fascinates me. Do not know. But there is further reporting on this in the Sydney Morning Herald, and I'll just read this out to you as well, and then I'll get to some of the comments section. The coalition is in tatters after Nationals leader David Littleproud and all the party's front benches joined 3 senators and so on, following through from a bombshell threat that he made to opposition leader Susan Lee, triggering one of the biggest crisis in Conservative politics for a generation. Littleproud and 10 National front benches quit Lee's front bench on Wednesday evening after she had accepted the resignation, 3 Nationals, and we know all of that. After he made his call, Lee released a statement saying she was trying to persuade him to change his mind. This evening I spoke with leader of the Nationals, David Littleproud, and strongly urged him not to walk away from the coalition, she said. I have received additional offers of resignations from National Party shadow ministers, which I and my Liberal leadership group have determined are unnecessary. So she's kind of backstepping now. The Liberal Party supports the coalition's arrangements because they deliver the most effective political alliance for good government. I note that in David's letter, he has not indicated that the Liberals are leaving the coalition. But it does, and I haven't heard any direct comments that they are, even though ostensibly it is a split. So, Bridget just said that she thinks that it's all over. But I don't know whether we've actually got anything about all of that. Right, someone's just asked something else, which I will ignore. Okay, so where does all of this leave us? Who knows? Liberal Party's a mess. Everything's a mess. Everything's distorted and way out of control. And will they be able to get their act together in 2 years' time when there's another election? Will they be able to actually put together some policies and some ideas? Or are we just discovering a completely new way of conducting politics in Australia? Are we now at a point whereby we're going to have 3 parties that are kind of level pegging in the electorate? Are we going to have One Nation on one side, along with the Nationals and the Liberal Party, all vying for the same voters, and on the other side we're going to have the Labor Party and the Greens and the Teals all vying for another set of voters? And which one of those is going to win out? Well, I reckon at the end of the day it's going to be the Labor Party and those on the left that are probably likely to win out on any of that. Okay, let's... I don't know if I've got anything else in relation to that. I'll just come to some of the comment sections in a moment. And there was a note in The Guardian. Littleproud announced a split of untenable coalition, saying Lee new consequences of hate speech divide. And that brings me to another complicated... will they have enough reps? Yeah, I don't know about that, Sarah. So I don't know what... just the only other leadership, Mr. Beach, we can have a look at that. Oh, get rid of that one. Try again. The only other leadership person is Handy Hasty, who appears to freak out while in charge of the SAS. He did too. He would be a despicable person. And that's the other question, I guess, is, who do you have to replace some of these people if they decide to continue with the split? There's the only one that... So this is Daniel Cooper. They're the only ones that care for Australia. I'm assuming you're talking about the Libs, because we kind of get which side of politics you might be on, Danielle. All right, if someone's referring to Danielle as a troll, I don't disagree. So is it legal to... Yeah, I just want to bring us to this point before I go on to... I'll get rid of that one, so I wanted to have a conversation with you all about where you think the vilification laws sit in Australia. Now, I'll be honest, I haven't read... I read of the initial legislation that was proposed. I haven't written the legislation that passed. And I am confused, extremely confused, about what it is that one can say and what one can't say. And my understanding at this particular point, and I hope some of you will be able to help me out here, if I decide, if I belong to a group, let's say the ABC party or whatever, or the ABC organisation, and I make comments that are distinctly hateful, that are vilifying a particular group of people that might be a religious group, ethnic group, whatever, I could be taken to court. I could be convicted even of a crime of hate. That group could be, or that group could find themselves under the purveyance of ASIO and consequently be banned or whatever. If I'm an individual, though, now let's think about this issue. If I'm an individual and I make a statement, which I'm about to make, and that is that genocide committed by Israel is a crime, and that Netanyahu should be charged in a court, as he is in the ICC, but he should be charged with a crime against humanity, and that the killing of innocent people, such as women and children in particular, and making statements about wiping a country of a certain group of people, e.g. Palestinians, is wrong. And I make a stand against all of that. To make that sort of a statement, is it the same as blanketly saying that anybody that criticises Israel is anti-Jewish? Is it anti-Semitic to make a comment about a country and a government that are committing horrible, horrible crimes? In the same way, it is not anti-Russian to say that Putin is a war criminal also, because he's taking children out of Ukraine, heaven only knows what they're doing with them, and that he is bombing indiscriminately the population in Kiev, and that he illegally has taken over land that didn't belong to him. Is that equally as wrong as saying that Israel is committing genocide? Am I being anti-Russian? Am I being anti-Jew? Am I saying that because you live in Israel, you belong to the Jewish faith? No, that's just not true, because there are many people in Israel of many faiths, quite a few Christians, in fact. So clearly it's not saying that. But in terms of the legislation, does it mean that I need to restrict my speech about Israel, but I don't need to restrict my speech about Russia or, I don't know, Iran or Turkey or any other country that's causing some atrocities, or Syria? doesn't mean that I need to modify my speech based on these new laws. And this is what I am confused about. Because if that is the case, I would stand against that legislation. And, I think, do we need to be more, I'd like to know what many of you think about the type of legislation that we should have, if at all. Because on the other hand, should we be able to have a conversation about, allow people to say whatever they say, and if someone feels particularly aggrieved about something that's said towards them or about them personally, then there should be an opportunity to take them to court. So we need to modify our the court process in regard to litigation. So what is it, do you think, that we need to do in order to modify all of that? Or are the laws as they sit right at this moment appropriate? I'd be most interested to know if any of you have any views around that. I know that some of you are having a conversation at the moment about Pauline Hanson by the looks of things. So I'll just put, so someone says here, as to your question, from my reading, 100% confident it wouldn't be, okay, I'll put that up. It would be 100% confident it wouldn't be illegal considered under these laws, but there's a lot of people trying to push that narrative. Yeah, and I guess, I'm just being frank, I don't know. Does it mean then that law needs to be tested before we can make any decisions about where that law sits? I understand there is a group now, one of those dudes that was extremely anti-Semitic, and he, one of the Muslim church leaders, who is actually challenging the laws at this moment. So maybe we need to see what happens with regard to those sorts of challenges and see what the High Court actually has to say also about any of that. So yeah. Oh, gee, Danielle, I'll just ignore you. So yes, let me know what you think about any and all of that. So I wanted to know and I think maybe in another live feed, we could have further conversations about where the free speech laws go, and whether or not I believe that if they should have done more about the vilification laws, but they didn't, because I think that the focus seems to always have been around anti-Semitism. We need to look at hate speech across the board, whether that refers to Jewish people, people of the Muslim faith, people that are LGBTQI plus people, people with disabilities, and people of different races. So there needs to be a widespread understanding around what the laws could be that could limit those sorts of hate speeches. But also, I think we need to look at ways by which we can start to just treat each other more appropriately. And part of that is the education process. I'm a bit concerned about the efforts to provide the Siegel version, the Gillian Siegel version of anti-Semitism, which does actually cross the line into criticising Israel. That needs to be evaluated. It's disappointing that they adopted that particular version, according to Gillian Siegel, who's a Zionist. So we need to confront, I think, and maybe this is the point. Maybe this is about all of us deciding, or was deciding through elections, whatever, who we elect, that some of the things that they've chosen to do are not going to be accepted by the community. There's parts of the community that'll just simply say, we don't want to have anything to do with that. and perhaps as parts of the community will say, well, we need to find different ways to provide educational processes that help people to understand that calling people names and other stuff and to vilifying people is inappropriate and it's wrong. Maybe we need to become, as a society basically, maybe we just need to become more tolerant, more understanding, more accepting. Danielle, I will bite. Daniel Cooper has said, because I have no idea what you're friggin' talking about here. I'll bring it back up. All of this is nothing but sweeping the actual problem under the carpet. I'll bite. Tell me, Daniel, what you think the problem is, and I'll stop sweeping. So, where do we all stand in relation to all of this? I don't know. I think with this, without Bondi, and I just want to come back to this Bondi thing for a moment, because really, at the end of the day, the Bondi attack was by two men, father and son, who sat across their kitchen table, who listened to, radical as Islamic stuff, and who built on this hatred, right? So it wasn't like they necessarily engaged, and I guess we'll find out more about this in the Royal Commission, but my understanding is they didn't necessarily engage with hate speakers, Muslim hate speakers in Australia. They may have engaged with them online, that they cooked this stuff up themselves. And from them cooking this up and the horrible murdering of 15 people on December the 14th, brought about an event which is horrible, absolutely horrible. If it hadn't happened, so my question is this, if it hadn't happened, does it mean we wouldn't have done anything? It was fascinating to me that the Susan Lee in Question Time on Tuesday attempted to batter Albanese by getting him to say sorry, just the word sorry. Albanese said, in his defence, that he takes responsibility because he was Prime Minister at the time. But she so desperately wanted him just to say, I'm sorry. There's a fine difference between, I think, saying I feel responsible. I think that's good enough, as opposed to say I'm sorry. Maybe sorry is a bit more intense. But anyway, he said I'm sorry. Sorry. He said I'm responsible, not I'm sorry. And Susan Lee kept at it. And the more she kept at it, she looked so bloody foolish, because he turned around and said, anti-Semitism has been here for decades. Morrison chose nothing. Abbott chose nothing to do with it after the Lindt Cafe siege. Other governments after the Bali bombing chose nothing to do with it. And he highlighted 3 or 4 instances where, and the Morrison government chose not to deal with anti-Semitism. And then he listed all the things that they have done, which often I think tend to get missed. And, whether it be bringing in the envoy and whether it be some legislation that they've made in order to curb hate speech, which they've done. And the confrontation that's occurred through 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act, and how the Liberal Party stood against that, those changes to tighten racial discrimination. And and how I think the Liberal Party just looks sort of more weak, more inferior, and they're just clutching at straws, trying to effectively hit a blow, when in actual fact, a lot of the responsibility around what's happened in relation to all of this has been on them, because they were in Parliament for 9.5 years, for Christ's sake. And they did nothing. They did nothing. But don't take responsibility for any of that either. You'd expect Albanese to say, I'm sorry. And he turned to them and he got pretty angry. And he basically said to them, well, why don't you say you're sorry? Because you didn't do anything either. At least we did. And this is what we've done. It's done more than what the Liberal Party has ever done. So it just fascinates me. So conversation's still going on. So Daniel, I will bite again. It may have been here, but it's never been as bad. It increased, and it's a good point, so I will accept that. It did increase since October the 7th. And one needs to ask why. So tell me, and I don't want you to engage in this conversation, Danielle, because I'm not going to do that, but why October the 7th? There was a brutal attack by Hamas. Agreed. Everybody agrees with all of that. It was horrible. But was the response proportionate to the attack? No, it wasn't. And you'd have to be a certain size, certain sort of, trying to think of the word, a certain sort of hater to think that it was. And, you know, no one can justify the killing of women and children by Hamas. No one can. So why is it that we justify what Israel has done to the Palestinians? You know? And my argument has been all along, no evidence on any of this whatsoever, apart from a couple of videos that I've seen and some documentaries, that the Israeli government knew what was happening in Gaza, because they monitor Gaza, they monitor all their phones. You know, it's a prison, for Christ's sake. You know, it's like saying in a prison that you don't know when there's going to be a rebellion. Of course they know when there's going to be a rebellion, and they try and quell it before it happens. So did Netanyahu know that there was going to be a rebellion, that they were going to do this stuff, but he let it happen because he knew then that he could respond in the way that he did, and he'd be supported around that by the Israel people and by some Jewish people. Because we need to remember, for people like Danielle to remember, that there are a lot of Jewish people who disagree with what the IDF have done in Gaza. A lot of them. Traditional Jewish people in particular, who are pacifists, disagree greatly with what the government has done. Does that therefore make those people anti-Semitic? Does it make Jewish people anti-Semitic of Jewish people? No, of course it doesn't. It just means that there are people within the Jewish community who have different views. You know? So, anyway, moving along. I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes talking about Donald Trump. So, Trump went to Davos, a place where all the wealthy and the influential and the oligarchs and everybody else around the world gather to pat each other on the back, celebrate each other's wealth, and decide how the world should be moulded in their fashion. That's basically what it's all about. So we have Donald Trump turning up there, and what a friggin' embarrassment. The day before, we had Mark Carney from Canada talking about how the the NATO alliance and the way the world has been constructed for 80 years is now gone. Or he doesn't mention Trump once, but it's evident that he's saying Trump is the cause of all of this. Trump has created an environment in which we cannot no longer trust them. Now, my argument now is that for 80 years, the world has been conned by the United States. Every president, Republican and Democrat, has conned us by creating this image of the United States, as Reagan said, being the light on the hill. They are not. They have more power in terms of military power and economic power, granted. But that doesn't mean they're a light. In fact, what they have done is conned us to believe that everything they do is for the betterment of everybody else, when in actual fact, they are a narcissistic nation who has decided that we have so much power and influence that we're going to convince you that what we're doing is looking after you. It's like, I was trying to think of an analogy, it's a bit like an orphanage taking in kids, saying we're going to look after you and care for you and feed you, and then abusing them. Because in a sense, that's what the United States has done. They have always wanted to have the power and the influence that would be able to control other nations. And we have fallen for it until now. And in this particular moment, we can settle back and we can start to say, no, we're not buying into this anymore. You are a fallacy. You are a lie. And we're going to step back from you because we can establish our own alliances, which will be more powerful than yours. And as Carney said the other day, he's building alliances with a whole host of different people based on their needs and his own. And a strange one was the two of them actually, which is the manufacturer of electric vehicles. So he has decided, whereas there was 100% tariff or something on electric vehicles from China, he's now cut that down. I think, I could be wrong, someone will tell me if I'm wrong, 6%. So he's making electric vehicles cheaper than anything that the United States or even Tesla can produce. And he's making them available to the tune of about 45,000 a year. Remarkable. Because they need the cars, China needs to sell them. Canola is another one where the canola oil is really important to Chinese people, and they produce in Canada a lot of canola. So he's selling heaps of that to them. And this is a realignment which would not have occurred without Trump. And it's almost like the world got a kick in the ass and said, well, okay, we're going to start to do things differently because you bastards can't be trusted anymore. Basically, that's what they've said. And as a result of that, every country, apart from the United States, is looking for other ways by which they can invest. And of course, the other issue is that the United States has debt everywhere. And even though I'm not an economist, don't know much about economic issues anyway, but certainly the debt that they owe China and Europe is extreme. And the buying of American bonds is important to America. So if they call in the debt, if they stop buying American bonds and the American dollar crashes, and they stop buying products from the United States but start buying them from each other around the world and selling them to each other, that could put, even though it would be disruptive, I believe, it could put an end to the dominance of the United States. Because at the end of the day, the United States is not just interested in its military power, it is interested in its economic power as well. Take that away from it and cripple it, which Europe and the rest of the world could do, then we may see the destruction of the United States. I don't know how long that'll take, maybe a decade, maybe a week, given how ruptured the United States market can be when somebody blinks. So let's wait and see. So, and Macron has stepped into the breach here. Macron warns of Trump's new colonialism as US President leaks Greenland texts. Another thing Trump did. What a moron. US President Donald Trump has shared a private message purportedly from his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron ahead of a global economic forum in Davos, Switzerland. In the message posted as a screenshot to Truth Social, so why in the world would you even send a private message to the rest of the world? I mean, how can you trust, like if you had a friend who did that and the message was extremely private and personal, would you want to continue a relationship with that friend? I don't think you would. So that's what Trump's done though, because he's not really a friend. In the message posted a screenshot to so Mr. Macron told Mr. Trump he would get set up a G7 meeting in Paris on Thursday afternoon, and he did not understand what the US president was doing on Greenland. According to the message, Mr. Macron told the US president that he could invite the Ukrainians, the Danish, Syrians and the Russians to participate on the margins of the meeting. Mr. Macron also invited Mr. Trump to have dinner with him at Paris on Thursday. Mr. Trump's replies, if any, were not part of the screenshot that he posted. So who knows what he said? But at the end of the day, can you trust this man? So the other headline, of course, that came out of all of this is Donald Trump drops Greenland tariffs threat as he heralds a future deal with NATO. This was the most appalling speech. If you're an American and you watch this speech, surely you would be embarrassed. He messed up. He called Greenland Iceland 4 times. Now, if this man isn't suffering from mental decline, then I don't know what your definition of mental decline is, I guess. Donald Trump says he has agreed to a framework. How many times have we heard that from Donald? I have a framework. I have an understanding of a plan. Anyway, here's a framework of a future deal. No one knows what it is on Greenland after talks with NATO chief Mark Rutte in Switzerland. Now, Mark Rutte unfortunately, is a sycophant of Donald Trump. It's appalling. The US president also said he would not go ahead with threatened new tariffs on Europe nations that was sending troops to the Danish territory. Mr. Trump made the announcement on social media after giving a speech in which he ruled out using military force to acquire Greenland. So, based upon a very productive meeting that I've had with the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, we have formed a framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region. What I think that means is that they have decided to send forces into the Arctic, develop further security protocols, probably send people to Greenland, or if you're Donald Trump, you'd probably send them to Iceland by mistake. But nevertheless, they plan to work together on a structure in which to assist that incredible, or to do something about that incredible influx of all those Russian and Chinese ships that are sailing in the region. People in Greenland say, in fact, that there hasn't been Chinese ships floating through that region for years. So who knows where Trump gets that from. But there again, Trump lies all the time. Now, I did ask a question at the beginning of my session. If you haven't had a chance to respond to it, please do. In my poll, is the coalition doomed? 82% of you say yes. I would support that. I think they are, as regrettable as that would be sound for our politics. Right. Just reading. Right, so people have some interesting conversations about all of that. I want to thank you all for being on board today. I really appreciate it. I do must need to say there's a wonderful session I had with Richard King on Tuesday. I do encourage you all to watch that. A wonderful bloke, and hopefully Richard will be able to be with me next Tuesday as well. Remember to subscribe to my channel, because many of you that watch my videos don't subscribe. Please subscribe. That helps me. And also to watch that video with regard to the discussion Richard and I had. As an Indigenous person, had some really interesting things to say about First Nations experiences. So please watch that as well. In the meantime, I just want to say to everybody, if you've got a subject that you would like me to talk about or investigate or whatever, research, please let me know in the comments section below. And also to try and share my videos with people. It's really important. I'm almost up to 9,000 subscribers at the moment, and I wanted to get 10,000 by the end of the month. So that's my goal. Help me to get there. I would really appreciate it. In the meantime, all I can say to you folks, take care.